Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. Please make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out the links below. So, let's jump right into it here. It is April 18th, the year of our Lord 2023. And it looks like we had a military chief from China travel to Russia in order to strengthen their already strong relations, specifically military cooperation between the countries. So I think it's no secret that China and Russia are literally becoming like best of friends, and that their great common enemy is the United States. And of course, the US is not innocent in all this. As a matter of fact, there are sanctions against Russia, their NATO expansion, the economic sanctions against China and sort of its aggressive stance against the Chinese government has alienated both countries and, drove them into each other's arms. And this has actually backfired on the US because we're talking about literally like the top three countries in the world, right? The three world superpowers: Russia, the US, China. And so now it's 2 against 1, but what the US has, it's the dollar, right? That it's used all over the world. It's used as a backup currency. So they still have that economic power. And so, when the US has that leverage right now, because, again, if the US collapses, if the US economy collapses like it's already doing, but once, like I believe we see the complete economic collapse of the US, it's going to affect Russia and China, but a lot less than other countries since they've already started to, leave the use of the dollar. On top of that, we now have the military threat of a combo between Russia and China. Again, Russia is the #1 nuclear superpower in the world with the most nuclear weapons. The US would be second, and then I think we have China, England, Iran, North Korea, Israel, and England, if I didn't already mention them. But principally, we have Russia, the US, and China. And so just the fact that Russia is the #1 world nuclear superpower, and China, I would say, even though they don't have the world reserve currency, they do have the biggest economy in the world. And I say that because literally everything I look at is produced in China. They pretty much have all the production. A lot of the stuff that gets shipped over to the US is made in China, including the lovely iPhones. And so all of this is going to have economic repercussions, as we are already seeing. But this military alliance here, it's another big thing that is happening here, and it's going to shape the future, the recent future that we're heading into. And this is definitely going to create a major problem for the US, and they have only their leaders to blame since they are the ones making these decisions. And so recently we saw Xi Jinping, the president of China, travel over to Russia, essentially to make agreements to create a plan for the future. And it was a big deal. They had all these incredible ceremonies. Putin and Xi Jinping looked like best buddies that hadn't seen each other in a while. And they just kept giving each other compliments and holding all these ceremonies with soldiers walking down red carpets, handing out medals and chains. And so it was something you would imagine you would see like in the old empires when kings would receive other kings, right? They would make these ginormous festivities. And so it just shows you how close Russia and China are working and how serious their partnership is. And it's being invigorated by the U.S. By the U.S. literally just standing there trying to act like they are still the number one top dog in the world, just like we saw right after World War II. But that's not the case. And again, you can't blame the U.S. government, right? Like I always say, you can have the best form of government, the most beautiful laws or constitution, the fairest, the most just, but the problem is always human beings. It's the people that are in power. No, a piece of paper can't enforce itself, and so these people in positions of power are the ones that make these decisions, and a lot of the times greed and self-interest and evil plays a part in those decisions based on that person's ideology or way of thinking. And so all these past leaders have made terrible, international decisions or foreign policy decisions. We saw Trump. He had a very aggressive stance against China, and he essentially started this economic war with China. Right? That was literally like what Russia right now is to the Biden administration. China was that to Trump. Right? That was like Trump's scapegoat, right, or his number one enemy. And so now that we have Biden, they got into this whole situation with Russia because of their attempt to expand NATO into Ukraine and sort of encircle Russia. And so now you've pushed both superpowers into each other. And this is where I would interject my personal opinion and say that this is biblical in nature. So, the U.S. is, all nations are eventually going to go to war. They will all be destroyed according to biblical scripture, right? This world has to be destroyed just like it was in the days of Noah. Judgment is coming upon the world. But the U.S., it holds a special position, and right now we're seeing its downfall. I do think it's going to rise one more time before we have a World War III scenario, but I think all of this is sort of shaping, it's setting the scene for what it will look like in the end, and we can clearly see that this is going to be Russia and China versus the United States, at least here in the short future. So, with all that being said, and sorry for the long talk, guys, I did just want to express my analysis on this situation. But anyways, we had this military chief that went to Russia right after Xi Jinping, had all those wonderful ceremonies over there with Vladimir Putin, and they're not trying to hide anything or what this visit was for, as we're clearly going to read in this article. So let's take a look here. This is the Associated Press, and it says the Chinese defense chief vowed Tuesday to take military cooperation with Moscow to a new level. Now, pretty much what I'm getting from all of this is that now, since they're doubling down on their cooperation with everything going on right now with the tensions in Taiwan and Ukraine, I am expecting now the possibility very soon of China getting involved, much in the same way that the U.S. is involved in Ukraine by sending weapons to Russia. And also, I'm expecting Russia to double down on its support for China to reel in Taiwan, right? To unify Taiwan with China. And I would take that as an indication that China will be even more ready to take Taiwan back by force now that, they have such a deep commitment with Russia militarily. So it says Chinese Defense Minister Zhen Li Shangfu held talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu after attending a meeting Sunday with Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. The armed forces of China and Russia will implement the agreements reached by the heads of state and expand military cooperation. So they clearly just admitted here that there were agreements here between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, right? The agreements reached by the heads of state and expand military cooperation. So we're pretty much getting verification here, confirmation that Xi Jinping and China were in fact talking about military moves, military planning, military technical ties, and arms trade, Li said in opening remarks at Tuesday's meeting with Shoigu. We will certainly take them to a new level. Li's trip follows last month's 3-day state visit to the Russian capital by Chinese leader Xi Jinping, reflecting China's strengthening engagement with Russia. Moscow and Beijing have closely aligned their policies in an attempt to reshape the world order to diminish the influence of the United States and its Western allies, and there's no doubt that that has already happened beyond anything the United States expected. China has refused to criticize Russia's actions in Ukraine and blamed the U.S. and NATO for provoking Moscow. Xi's visit to Moscow gave a strong political boost to Putin, sending a message to Western leaders that their efforts to isolate Russia have fallen short. After the talks, Putin and Xi issued joint declarations pledging to further bolster their strategic cooperation, develop cooperation in energy, high-tech industries, and other spheres, and expand the use of their currencies and mutual trade to reduce dependence on the West. After more than a year of fighting in Ukraine and bruising Western sanctions, Russia's dependence on China has increased significantly, facing Western restrictions on its oil, gas, and other exports. Of course, Russia, as is clearly known, has fared pretty well amidst this barrage of sanctions, and I think the International Monetary Fund or Monetary Bank, or whatever they call themselves, actually predicted that Russia's economy is going to increase this year. They pretty much, they held through the storm, and that's why I say that all of this backfired on the U.S., because it's actually affecting them even more. So, Russia has shifted its energy flows to China and sharply expanded other exports, resulting in a 30% hike in bilateral trade, which is incredible for China and Russia, right? They found an answer to the U.S.'s monopoly on commerce, right? Last month, Putin and Xi also vowed to further develop military cooperation between Moscow and Beijing and conduct more joint sea and air patrols. However, there was no mention of any prospective Chinese weapon supplies to Russia that the U.S. and other Western allies feared, and the Chinese foreign minister reaffirmed Friday that Beijing wouldn't sell weapons to either side in the conflict in Ukraine. So, one more point on that last part. I think Russia has more than enough to take care of Ukraine, even with the support that it's receiving from the U.S. and NATO, since that support really isn't enough to actually give Ukraine to overcome Russia or launch a major counteroffensive that would push them out of Ukraine. I think Russia will, I think they will come out. They will come out the winners in the conflict, and I don't think they will need China's help unless the U.S. and NATO were to escalate. But then again, we're talking about the number one world nuclear superpower, so Russia can use small tactical nukes if things were to escalate to that level, but I don't think the U.S. and NATO are willing to. And so I don't think that China, they might provide some supplies, but probably, not like the main Chinese battle tanks and jets or missiles. But, if things did escalate to that type of level, that's definitely a possibility now with these types of visits. And yeah, I think, this is just going to encourage both nations to be even more aggressive, concerning U.S. policy. And so, overall, things are definitely going to rise in tension. And, the next place I would fix my eye on is definitely Taiwan. But yes, this is just catastrophic to the Western world order. And if Russia comes out, victorious this year, right? If there is an end to the conflict there definitively in Ukraine, and then China actually attacks Taiwan, well, then the U.S. is not going to have any other option but to, declare a full-out economic war against China. And as I've said before, if you think these sanctions on Russia and everything that happened with the oil and the inflation we're seeing right now is terrible, just wait till there's an economic war between China and the U.S. And that's already happening. Again, Trump started that. But once China actually, attempts to take Taiwan, and surely they will because they're just that much more superior, and I don't think the U.S. is willing to start a nuclear war over Taiwan, much like Ukraine. It's going to precipitate the collapse of the Western world economy, and I think Russia and China will do better in that time, since a lot of the production of actual physical things is in China. So you'd rather be left with actual products, physical items, and things like that in your hands than inflated currency, because you can't do anything with the paper besides burn it. And so China will have the physical things, and they have these trade agreements with Russia. Again, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, Iran, all these other countries that are also in alliance with those powers. But again, just when it looks like the complete collapse of the Roman Empire, I think the U.S. will rise one more time, and that's when, again, I interject my biblical beliefs. We will see a one world economic system, and I think that eventually will heat up so bad, and we will have a World War III, without getting into the details for the sake of the duration of this video. But anyways, things are definitely developing quickly here between Russia and China. It looks like they are in a hurry to let the world know that they're the best of partners militarily, and so that could definitely mean a soon invasion of Taiwan, and possibly an acceleration in Ukraine by the Russians to finish the conflict, as they encourage each other. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.